The scape outside the viewport was a slick, neon-drenched curtain, a constant reminder that this interstellar budget rust bucket of a cruise ship was nothing more than a glorified floating prison. The Stardust Seraphim, a name as gaudy as the clientele it ferried across the cosmos. It was supposed to be a vacation for the well-heeled, a cosmic joyride. For me, it was a purgatory of bad synth jazz and even worse synthetic cocktails. I was just a ghost on a bus, heading to a job on some backwater planet called G7, and this was the cheapest ticket. My name is Deacon Thorne, or it was. Back on Earth, they called me the Eye, a private investigator who could find a shadow in a sunbeam, but that was a long time ago. Now I was just a tired man in a crumpled trench coat, nursing a lukewarm coffee and wishing I could trade this spaceship for a smoky backroom in 1930s Chicago. A place where the dame's lips were painted red and the only robots were in a Buck Rogers comic. A world that made sense, even with all its broken parts. This world, with its polished chrome and synthetic everything, felt entirely hollow. The robots here, though, were real, gleaming metal automatons with no expression in their chrome faces. The crew of automatons were mechanical device bots designed to mimic human movement, run by a central AI, with their purposes ranging from entertainment, piloting of the craft to bartenders and waiting staff. They served drinks, cleaned rooms, and now, apparently, were tasked with keeping the peace after a body was found. The ship's security AI, a disembodied voice named Orion, had already started its pre-recorded loop of assurances.
All guests are safe. The situation is under control. Please return to your cabins. Nothing to see here. Move along. Move along.
It was a lie so transparent you could see the cold, dead stars through it. It started with a scream, the kind that cuts through the hum of the ship's engines and makes the lukewarm coffee taste like bitter regret. A dame, the kind with eyes like a black hole, and a walk that could stop a man's heart, had found the body. Her name was Isabella. She was the kind of woman who wore a smile like a weapon, and a dress that looked like it was spun from starlight and lies. She said she was a tourist, a socialite on her way to a lunar gala, but her story had more holes than a cheese grater. Her alibi was thinner than my wallet.
I found him in his cabin, just lying there, Detective. Like a fallen star. It's just awful. Just awful, Detective. Horrible.
The him was a man named Sterling, a corporate bigwig with more credits than morals. His official title was Director of Interstellar Mining Operations, which meant he was a glorified space pirate with a better suit. He was dead, all right. A single clean shot to the chest. No one heard a thing. The robots said everything was routine, but I knew better. I knew a murder when I saw one, and this had all the hallmarks of a classic setup. The kind you'd see in a picture show, a Maltese falcon with a futuristic twist. Sterling's body was a message, a warning scrawled in blood and betrayal on a ship where every corner promised a good time. The ship's automated systems had already sealed the crime scene, a pristine white door with a blinking red light, like a sentry keeping secrets. But the secrets were already in the air, thick and heavy. I looked at Isabella, her eyes unreadable. She was a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in silk and perfume. She claimed to have been on her way to get a drink from the bar, a route that just happened to take her past Sterling's cabin, a coincidence I wouldn't bet a single credit on. I had a feeling she was the key to this whole rotten affair, a lockbox of secrets waiting to be pried open. But I also had a feeling that opening that box would unleash something far more dangerous than just the truth. It would unleash the kind of trouble that could get a man killed, even a man who was already half dead inside. And in a world run by soulless machines, a world where the only thing that mattered was credits and power, I was starting to think that was the only way to live, the only way to feel anything at all. The Stardust Seraphim's atrium, a place usually filled with the gentle clinking of cocktail glasses and polite conversation, had become a morgue. A hush fell over the crowd after I dropped the bombshell. "Folks, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. There has been a murder on board." It wasn't the kind of silence born of respect. It was the sharp, breathless quiet that follows a car crash. They weren't just tourists anymore. They were suspects, and I was their unwilling warden. I saw the whispers start, tiny ripples spreading through the crowd. A woman in a shimmering gown leaned into her partner, her manicured hand flying to her mouth. A portly man in a too-tight suit began to sweat. his eyes darting nervously toward the exits, which of course were sealed. They all had a secret, a motive, something to hide. And now, somehow I'd been tasked to figure this whole mess out. It was my job to peel back the layers and expose the rot beneath the polished facade. And I was good at it, or at least I was. You all came on this cruise to escape, I continued, my voice now low, to run away from your mediocre lives, problems and mistakes. But, you. Well, you can't outrun a bullet, and you certainly can't outrun a murder. Now, Sterling's death wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal, and someone in this room hated him enough to end his life. That's a fact. No way of getting around it. Now the automatons. They can track your movements, but there are blind spots. Although they can do an average job at best at that, they cannot track your motives. They can't see the jealousy, the betrayal, the greed festering in your hearts. My eyes locked onto Isabella, the femme fatale who'd found the body. She met my gaze without flinching, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. She wasn't just a suspect, she was a predator, enjoying the chaos she had unleashed. She had the look of a woman who knew things that could get a man killed. I had a feeling our little chat in the hallway was just the first act of a much longer, much more dangerous play. Another voice from the crowd, a young man with a smug face and a platinum credit chip visible in his shirt pocket, piped up.
This is preposterous. We're paying customers. You can't just detain us like this. My father is a senator on Mars. I'll have you thrown in a brig for this.
I gave him a look that could curdle milk. Your father's a senator, huh? Well, my name is Deacon Thorne, and I don't give a damn about politics and your sassy father. He can't save you from a murder charge, and he certainly can't save you from me. Sit down and shut up. Your vacation is over. The smugness evaporated from his face, replaced by a pale fear. The rest of the crowd fell silent again, realizing the rules of their little game had just changed. This wasn't a party anymore. This was a crime scene, and they were all trapped in it, with a man who had nothing left to lose. I felt a grim satisfaction. This was my world, the world of shadows and lies. And for the first time since I stepped on this damn ship, I felt like I was home. The game had begun, and every single person in that atrium was a pawn. And I, the ghost from the past, was the only one who knew how to play. I looked at the sea of terrified faces, and I had no doubt that one of them held the key to this whole twisted mess. The only question was, who would break first? My words hung in the air, a thick blanket of suspicion over the assembled guests. That's when a new voice cut through the tension, a woman with a severe haircut and a face that looked like it had been shaped from silly putty.
You look familiar. Wait! I know who You're that Deacon Thorne, the detective who shot Sir Waddles III.
A murmur swept through the atrium, a wave of recognition and shock. Heads turned, eyes widened. The name, Sir Waddles III, was a household one across the star systems. A beloved galactic mascot, a fluffy penguin-like creature that had captured the hearts of millions as the face of the Interstellar Space Race Championships. The man next to her, a slick-haired individual with a nervous tic, chimed in.
Yeah, the news said he was a corrupt detective who went rogue. They said he gunned down Sir Waddles after the championships, claiming the mascot had been stealing credits from the organization and was a criminal mastermind.
I felt the familiar heat of shame creep up my neck, a ghost from a past I had tried so hard to outrun. The headlines had been brutal. Detective gunned down's beloved mascot, Thorne's treachery, the fall of a hero. They had painted me as a monster, a man who had shot a beloved, innocent creature in cold blood. The truth was far messier. Sir Waddles III wasn't just a mascot. He was an illegal bioengineered creature with a penchant for high-stakes heists and a web of galactic crime syndicates. He'd been stealing millions in prize money and had even kidnapped a rival team's navigator. Not to mention he was a grade A asshole. My investigation had led me to the truth, but no one had believed me. The public loved that damn mascot, not wanting to believe his criminal double life he had been leading. My reputation was ruined, my career over, and I was banished to the shadows. That's enough, I said, my voice now a low growl that silenced the crowd. What I did, or didn't do, to a bioengineered bird has no bearing on a human being's murder. But let's be clear, I was right then. Shooting Sir Waddles, and I'm right now. A killer is on this ship, and if you don't cooperate, I'll put every single one of you under a magnifying glass until I find them. A crime is a crime, whether it's committed by a man or a stupid bird mascot." The crowd gave a collective gasp. I looked out at the sea of faces, no longer seeing tourists, but a collection of secrets, fears, and lies. They could whisper all they wanted about my past, about Sir Waddles and the public spectacle, but I knew the truth. My past had taught me that no one is who they seem, and every polished surface hides a dark and dangerous secret. I was a cynical man, but I wasn't wrong. I wouldn't stop until I found the truth, and I would tear this ship apart piece by piece if I had to. And as I looked at Isabella, a flicker of something in her eyes told me she knew it too. This was a game she wanted to play, and she had just found an opponent who played for keeps. Automatons clear out a maintenance room on my suggestion. For interviews, it was tight, but it would do. Back during my heydays, my claim to fame was the solving and subsequent arrest of Slade Rourke. Slade Rourke's early life was on Xylos Prime. He had been brought on a desolate frontier planet of Xylos Prime, a world carved out by the galactic megacorporation Omnicorp for its rich deposits of chroma ore, a valuable mineral used in FTL drive manufacturing. Life was a relentless cycle of toil in the deep mines. His parents, independent prospectors who had staked a claim on a particularly valuable vein, taught him to read star charts by the light of the binary suns and to listen for the faint echoes of shifting bedrock. He learned early that on Xylos Prime, survival was earned inch by inch, and trust was a commodity rarer than the ore itself. And when Slade was just 18, Omnicorp initiated a hostile takeover of all independent claims on the planet. Slade's family, refusing to sell their life's work for a pittance, became a target. Omnicorp's enforcers, a private security force known as the Hounds, sabotaged their mine, triggering a controlled collapse. Slade's parents were trapped and perished in the rockfall. Slade, who had been on a supply run, returned to find his family's livelihood and lives buried under tons of rubble. The Hounds with cold precision told him to leave or be buried with them. But you see, the tragedy didn't break him. It forged him into something harder and more dangerous than the chroma ore itself. Stripped of his home and his family, Slade had nothing left to lose. He spent the next 5 years as a phantom, living in the treacherous, uncharted glass wastes, a region of razor-sharp crystalline formations where the planet's indigenous predators roamed. He learned to navigate its deadly labyrinth, becoming an expert tracker and a master of ambush. It was here, in the heart of the unforgiving wastes, that he shed the last vestiges of his old life and embraced his new one. And Slade's first act of vengeance was against the Hounds who had destroyed his family. Using his intimate knowledge of the wastes, he ambushed their patrol, disabling their transport and leaving them stranded, helpless against the crystalline predators. From there, his crimes escalated. He became a legend whispered among the colonists, a figure who never left a trace. He didn't steal for simple profit. He orchestrated elaborate heists that crippled Omnicorp's operations. He targeted supply convoys, data cores, and the private shuttles of Omnicorp executives. His methods were brutal and efficient. Always leaving a clear message, he was striking back against the system that had taken everything from him. He saw himself not as a mere thief or murderer, but as an instrument of cosmic justice, a ghost haunting the corporation that had created him. His reputation as the ghost of the glass wastes spread across the sector, and a massive bounty was placed on his head. Slade Rourke was no longer just a man. He had become a symbol of rebellion, a cold-blooded specter of revenge, forever seeking to topple the galactic giant that buried his past under a mountain of rock. But after an ill-fated attempt on a credit heist which ended some civilians, I was called in. I eventually tracked him to an outlying solar system. From there, things got messy, ultimately ending with him dead after plugging him with my K-Series saber pistol. The cramped maintenance room smelled of ozone and synthetic grease. I had the automatons set up a makeshift interview area with a single metal table and 2 chairs, one for me and one for the first sucker I pulled in. I had Orion, the ship's AI, pull up the guest manifest, the names of the people I was now charged with babysitting. The list was a who's who of interstellar society, a rogues gallery of the wealthy and the corrupt. I felt a familiar thrill. This wasn't just a murder case. It was a cosmic game of chess, and I was about to make my first move. My mind, now sharp and focused, moved past the insults about my past. The story of Sir Waddles and my confrontation with Slade Rourke were just distractions. The real crime was here, now, on this ship, and I had a feeling the truth was far uglier than anyone could imagine. The first person I brought in was a nervous woman named Bethany, a self-proclaimed astrological therapist who claimed she could read the future in the stars. Her eyes, magnified by thick glasses, were wide with a fear I knew all too well.
I didn't do it, Detective, I swear.
She said, her voice a thin, reedy squeak.
I was in my cabin communing with the celestial energies. My client can vouch for my presence.
I gave her a look that could curdle milk. Save the theatrics. You were having a secret meeting with Sterling last night, weren't you? Your communication logs say so. He wasn't paying you for therapy. He was paying you to read his competitors' star charts, and you were giving him inside information. You were his informant, weren't you? Her face went pale. The facade of a New Age prophetess crumbled, revealing a frightened informant who had sold her soul for a few credits. I didn't care about her. She was a pawn, a piece in a larger puzzle. I just wanted to see if she knew anything about what Sterling was doing. Next up was a slick-haired man in a too-tight suit, a corporate lawyer named Julian who reeked of cheap cologne and desperation. I had Orion bring up his credit records. They were clean, but his gambling logs were not. He was in deep with a loan shark from the Outer Rim, a reptilian creature who would sooner eat a man than forgive a debt. He had lost millions on the last interstellar space race, the very same one that Sir Waddles had been a part of. You needed money, Julian, I said, my voice low. Sterling had it. Did you go to his cabin hoping to get a loan? His eyes darted nervously around the room, a guilty tell I had seen 1,000 times before. He looked like a cornered animal, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He was small time, a coward, not a killer. The game continued. I went through the list, one by one. I spoke with a washed-up hollow-star whose career had been torpedoed by Sterling's company. I interviewed a disgraced politician whose campaign had been funded by Sterling. Every single person had a motive. Every single one had a secret. The atrium was a pressure cooker of ambition, greed, and desperation. I was starting to think that any one of them could have pulled the trigger. But none of their motives felt right. They felt too simple, too obvious. Then I brought in the dame herself, Isabella. She glided into the maintenance room as if it were a royal court, her smile a Mona Lisa mystery. She sat in the metal chair as if it were a velvet throne, her eyes fixed on me. She didn't look nervous. She looked amused.
So, Detective,
She purred.
is this where you pin the murder on me? The classic femme fatale trope?
Her voice a low hum. You tell me, I said, leaning back in my chair. You've got a lot of holes in your story. You said you were a tourist, but Orion's records show that you're an interstellar courier. You've delivered packages to some of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. And you were carrying a special package for Sterling, weren't you? A small, heavily encrypted data chip. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she composed herself. The smile remained, but it was thinner now.
A girl has to make a living.
She said, her voice still a purr, but with an edge of steel.
And a courier's business is private, but the package for Sterling was just that. A package I never opened it.
I leaned forward, my hands flat on the metal table. I don't believe you. You weren't a victim, Isabella. You were the one who started this whole mess. The scream you made, the one that got everyone's attention. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a cry of victory. You killed him, didn't you? You took what was on that chip, and now you have something far more valuable than credits. Isabella's smile widened. It was no longer a mask. It was a genuine expression of admiration.
You really are good, Detective.
She said, her voice a low hum of pure satisfaction.
But I think you may be a bit rusty. You're a real relic from a forgotten time, aren't you?
She was right. The data chip was a red herring. It was an old-fashioned distraction. Her alibi was ironclad. She had found him, but she hadn't killed him. She was an opportunist, not a murderer. She was a scavenger, a wolf who had found a carcass and was now trying to see what potentially she could steal. Her smile, her eyes, and her whole persona was who she was, consumed by her act. Or she may be hiding something. Something more that had to do with Sterling's past, and perhaps with his killer. It was a hunch, but then it hit me. It wasn't about the money or the power. It was about something far more ancient and powerful. It was about revenge, possibly a meticulous years-long plot, not a crime of opportunity. My mind flashed back to the headlines that had ruined my life. Not just Sir Waddles, but the case that had preceded it. The case that had made me famous. Slade Rourke. The man who had dedicated his life to vengeance against the very type of corporate weasel Sterling represented. But Slade Rourke was dead, case closed. I knew it was... I'd been the one to pull the trigger. The thought was preposterous, laughable, the kind of ridiculous twist you'd only see in a hollow drama. But in my line of work, the wildest theories sometimes were the right one. And this murder wasn't just a copycat. It was something more. A continuation. A legacy. Someone was finishing what Rourke had started. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just a beat-up flat-foot gumshoe on a cheap bus anymore. I was a potential target. The killer wasn't just on the ship to get revenge on Omnicorp. They were here for me. My focus sharpened, my mind moving past the whiny suspects and the cunning courier. The pieces began to fit together in a horrifying picture. The methodical nature of the kill, the subtle taunts from the woman who had recognized me, the way the whole mess felt like a game. The killer wasn't looking for a quick escape. They were here for a final public showdown. I didn't waste another second. I cut the interview short, leaving Isabella to her thoughts. "Orion," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Run a full scan of all passenger names. Check for aliases, biometric markers, and anything else that might link them to an old case of mine. The Rourke case. I want a name, and I want it now." The AI's voice, usually so calm and disembodied, took on a subtle shift, a hint of processing strain. Holographic data streams and timelines flickered across my vision, a whirlwind of information. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Orion was sifting through billions of data points, cross-referencing names, biometrics, and even familial connections. I felt a cold dread settle in my gut as the AI's processes finally concluded.
Query complete, Detective Thorne. I have gone through all data resources and have done a micro-analysis on all relevant data. A direct match to the Rourke case is not present. However, a familial link is detected. Uploading to your screen now for view.
The screen in front of me shifted, the whirlwind of data coalescing into a single damning file. It was a passenger manifest, but one name was highlighted in a pulsing red. Cassian Vance, the senator's son, the smug young man with the platinum credit chip who had threatened me with his father's political power. Cassian Vance is the son of Alistair Vance, a former vice president of Omnicorp's interstellar mining division. Alistair Vance was one of Slade Rourke's primary targets during his campaign of vengeance. He survived multiple assassination attempts, but his family was placed in a permanent protection program. Cassian Vance's records show his birth name was different. He had changed it. Back. He had been adopted. His birth name was none other than Rourke. He was in fact the only surviving child of Slade Rourke, who died by my hand 5 years ago. The smugness on Cassian's face in the atrium suddenly made sense. It wasn't just the arrogance of a spoiled brat. It was the quiet confidence of a man who had planned every move. He wasn't just a passenger. He was a ghost from my past, a shadow from the glass waste who had been waiting for his chance to strike. He wasn't a criminal. He was a revolutionary seeking to finish his father's work, a son seeking revenge for his father he had secretly idolized. Sterling wasn't the target because of his wealth, but because he was a symbol of everything that had been taken from him. The senator's adopted son, a man who had been raised by the enemy of his biological father, and I had been the one who had killed his hero, his father. A boy who had now become a man and a killer. The game had just changed. It was no longer about solving a murder. It was about facing a ghost, a living embodiment of the legacy I had tried to bury. I looked at the image of Rourke's son on the screen, a new kind of dread rising in my gut. He wasn't afraid of me. He wanted me to find him. He had orchestrated this entire event to get me here. It was a trap, a meticulous one, sprung on a ship in the middle of a nowhere star system. He wasn't just here to kill. He was here to make a statement, and I was to be a part of it. Without a word, I walked out of the maintenance room and into the atrium. The terrified faces of the guests blurred into a single anxious mass. I scanned the crowd, my eyes finally locking on a familiar figure. The Rourke's son, Cassian Vance, Cassian Rourke, stood near the railing of the upper deck, a faint, unreadable smile on his face. He knew. He had to. He had been waiting for me. He had come here not to get a vacation, but to settle an old score. The game had just begun, and the last move was his.